Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. My guest today is Zbigniew Brzezinski. He served as National Security Advisor under President Jimmy Carter. He's now a trustee at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., where he joins us from via satellite. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brzezinski.
It's nice to be with you.
Mr. Brzezinski, I want to begin with the unveiling of the Trump administration's first budget. Basically, we see more defense spending and much less spending. For instance, for the State Department, a 28% cut is called for. We see also steep cuts for foreign aid. Some are saying it's a hard power budget proposal. What is your reaction to this budget plan?
I'm pretty sure that there's going to be an extensive debate about the various components of the budget, but it's very early to tell. And at this stage, I don't really have a fixed view, so I'm not going to expound on this subject. I want to see what comes out.
Mr. Brzezinski, you penned an article in the New York Times wondering if there was such a thing as a Trump doctrine on foreign policy. You say America first is fine when you're campaigning, but in terms of policy, have you been reassured that there is such a Trump doctrine on foreign policy, or are you still worried?
I am faithfully patient. In other words, I think there'll have to be. Obviously, there isn't one yet. But I think a lot of rearranging is taking place worldwide, and there will be consequences of that for our foreign policy. Take, for example, the case of North Korea. It's quite clear that it is becoming a menace. It is also very clear to me that we should not be the only ones who have to respond.
Right. I want to get to North Korea because things are heating up, if I may use that expression. Secretary of State Tillerson is in the region, and he said during a visit to South Korea that the policy of quote-unquote strategic patience with North Korea had ended and quote-unquote again, all options are on the table, indicating that the U.S. could maybe take preemptive military action. What is your reaction to this seeming shift on North Korea policy?
First of all, the reaction has been provoked by the North Koreans. And they have been pushing this issue a little too fast, too far forward, at risk to themselves, and of course, as a threat to us. So we have to adopt a position in which we respond. What I would like to see is a response not just by us alone, but by concerned countries with the power and the influence and the interest to be involved together with us. And my first choice would be to do something together, to take a joint stand with China. I think that should be our first choice. But at the same time, we ought to tell the Chinese that they're not willing to go in with us. Our second choice is a close strategic connection between the United States and Japan. And I should think this would give some food for thought to the Chinese themselves. I assume they're not in favor of an eventually significantly strategically active Japan.
Right, but are you concerned to hear the possibility of a U.S. military strike against North Korea that would be essentially a break from the policy that's been followed by several administrations?
The North Koreans may not give us much choice on the subject because they're coming very close to having the capability to hit the United States with massively destructive weaponry. So we'll have to preempt in some fashion.
Right. Speaking of China, this Friday, President Trump tweeted, I'm just going to quote him, North Korea is behaving very badly. They have been playing, quote unquote, the United States for years. China has done little to help, end quote.
Well, you know, what does it mean help? We have expressed our dislike for what they're doing. The Chinese are certainly not enamored with what they're doing. They may not be expressing their negative feelings as directly and openly as we do, but neither the United States nor China have taken any actions till now. And my key argument is, if we respond, we should do it together with the Chinese if they're willing. If they're not, obviously we have to help the Japanese attain a level of security that gives them national comfort, given the threats that the North Koreans are posing. And I think in the longer run, I'm not sure that China would like to see a nuclear Japan next door.
I want to move to a country that's been of much concern, of much debate, I should add, in the United States, Russia. There's also lots of talk about the intentions of Vladimir Putin here in Europe, with elections very close in France. In Germany, obviously, Donald Trump has been trying to say he wants to build a new relationship with Vladimir Putin. Is this the right policy to follow, or should the West be much tougher on Vladimir Putin?
I think it depends on specific issues. You can't generalize in that fashion. I think Russia has some threatening interests in the West that we have to discourage them from entertaining. And that's our duty. That's the interest also of Germany and eventually of France and even Great Britain, even as Great Britain now toys with Brexit. But there may be also circumstances in which there's something we can talk to the Russians about and see if we can fashion an outcome that's more satisfactory to both of us. I do have the sense that the Russians are aware of the fact that an all-out collision with the West would not be very productive. Certainly, if taken unilaterally by the Russians vis-à-vis the Baltic states, it could precipitate retaliatory measures that would deprive Russia of the remaining opportunity to trade effectively with the West. So that there are issues on which there may be a collision and a disagreement, but by and large, I think the long-term thrust of history is that Russia, to do well internationally, will have to become increasingly a European state and not a Eurasian state. And I think more and more Russians, perhaps even up to a point Mr. Putin himself, realize that Russia is on the brink of a very, very major historical redefinition.
Do you think on this issue that sanctions are the right policy with Vladimir Putin? They're both US and European Union sanctions. Do you think they should be lifted or suspended, maybe to try to engage Russia and see if this can lead to an improvement? Or do you think they should remain in place because that's the way you talk to Putin?
Look, these sanctions are not there as part of a game. They are the results of actions taken by Russia, specifically vis-à-vis Ukraine, Crimea, and so forth. Simply suspending them means what? That we no longer care about those issues. So it's really not an intelligent response. It provides nothing to us. It gratifies Russian ambitions and their conviction that the West will not respond. I am not advocating in any way a conflict with Russia that is waged by massive military efforts. But at the same time, if someone does something to us, to our closest friends, or to our own interests, we have the obligation to respond. And I think our response so far, together with the Germans, the British, the French, has been quite measured.
In terms of last issue I want to bring with you, ISIS, the fight against ISIS, the Trump administration is saying it wants to be more aggressive. We've seen reports of US intervening maybe in Syria. Do you think this is a welcome move, or do you think this could lead yet to another US military involvement in a region after so many wars and so much money and people who were sacrificed?
I think it depends on the choice that is made. The Middle East, writ large, is a very diversified region. Not every part of it, not every entity within that larger region is of the same importance to us. And I think we may have to pick and choose, not try to conduct a policy that's applicable to the entire region, but one which focuses on those parts of it that represent some vital interests to us. And I think it's quite evident which countries these are. we also have to be careful not to precipitate a nuclear conflict in the region, because there are at least two countries in the region that have nuclear weapons. One of them is Israel. The other one is Iran. It certainly is not in our interest to conduct ourselves in a manner that increases the probability that one or the other of these countries may feel so threatened that it feels it has to preempt.
One thing I would like to clarify, and this will be my last question, would you be in favor of a direct US military intervention in Syria?
I don't know what you mean by direct US military intervention.
Boots on the ground.
Syria is a complex entity and has many elements in it. I think we have been involved a little too much verbally, perhaps not enough militarily, but I think it would have to be a very careful and selective choice, based in part on a closer calculation of what ought to be the outcome of some American military engagement, specifically with what effort, at what cost, and within what limits. I don't think we're there. The president is not addressing this issue seriously. I don't know anyone around him who is in a position to impose their will on him. So I'm not particularly expecting some clear definition at this stage of what exactly the American interest ought to be.
Right. Just as a conclusion, are you worried about Donald Trump's foreign policy first steps? Or do you think things will eventually...
Excuse me for interrupting you, but you can't be worried about something that doesn't exist.
Zbigniew Brzezinski, thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.
Hello there, this is Live from Paris.